I will stick to my notes and look forward to the conversation that we're going to have in the Q&A. I'm so delighted with the work that CEEA does. You may know that I was fortunate to be a governor for a period of time before I decided to move on into politics. And what I always appreciated about CEEA was not only the incredible expertise and wealth of knowledge that's in the room, but the fact that it's a cross-partisan organization. You've got several energy ministers and former energy ministers who are here, Sonia Savage, for instance, my colleague Brian Jean, and of course Mark McQuaid-Boyd. And I think that it really is a credit to the organization that you are able to reach across the aisle and have perspectives from both sides, because that is what I think allows us to have such a strong industry, is when we're all pulling in the same direction. So I want to congratulate you on that. And I also want to congratulate you for your honest and unapologetic advocacy on behalf of the energy sector, because while industry faces uphill battles and continues to, our voices are needed even more. And in this room, we all know that the world needs Alberta to continue being a strong energy producer, especially in oil and gas. Our province has come under significant pressure to stop developing and using these resources, shutting down production based on misguided policy from our federal government. But we will never give in to that. I'm here to tell you that Alberta is an energy leader and will continue to remain an energy leader for many decades to come. In fact, energy leadership will be the policy priority for our government. As owner of the planet's fourth largest reserves of oil and gas, we will be bold. We will rely on a fresh approach to drive enhanced value and innovation in energy production and set the stage for many decades of growth, prosperity, and opportunity. As the global economy continues through the energy transition, Alberta will be there with reliable supplies of energy to shore up international stability. Our oil sands and conventional oil production is stable, and with the hopeful completion of the Trans Mountain expansion, we'll be adding egress to grow our production. I had the great fortune to meet with Don Farrell recently, and it sounds like we're getting down to the last 50 kilometers or so, so we're very excited about seeing the end of that construction in sight. Our gas is also some of the cleanest in the world, and our government will actively support market access to BC, to the U.S. Gulf Coast in support of LNG offtake. And the LNG opportunity is particularly important. With BC, we share one of the largest natural gas deposits in North America, the Montney Formation, which holds 4,497 trillion cubic feet of recoverable gas. And Alberta in particular holds about 2/3 of Canada's natural gas production, and we need to be assertive in moving more of it to the world. LNG is a critical fuel source for electricity production, both for residential use and for industrial processes like steel production, where it can lower emissions by displacing coal. And in the wake of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Europe is searching for more suitable suppliers. And Asian markets understand this too, with many countries looking for long-term supplies of Alberta-produced ammonia and natural gas. Vietnam alone is planning 13 new LNG plants and will be operational by 2030. I should just mention, I had the fortune to go to LNG 2023 in British Columbia, where I met with the leads of various LNG industry associations representing different regions around the world. And one of the things they said is they are very worried in 2030 if we don't do our part to get more LNG to them, because in 2030, if they don't have a secure supply of clean LNG, they're going to have to revert back to coal, which will increase global emissions. So anyone who tells you that the world doesn't need more LNG or there isn't a business case for export of LNG, as a Prime Minister once might have said, you have to respond to them with that we are actually going to be able to reduce global emissions in a very practical way by making sure that the world has access to our clean LNG. Markets across the globe want cleaner energy sources to reduce emissions, and Alberta can deliver them. Getting Alberta energy to global markets will lift the standards of living for the billions of people who live in different degrees of energy poverty. And we will not be alone in doing this. Indigenous participation and leadership is vital to these projects. The growing expansion of projects in British Columbia, led by Indigenous groups, that have clearly grasped the importance of economic reconciliation, is a tremendous example for all of us. Alberta also encourages and facilitates Indigenous participation through the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation. And you'll soon hear more about the kind of exciting projects that we are going to be able to backstop, that is going to demonstrate this leadership on a whole new scale. You may have heard last fall, we underwrote one of the deals that Enbridge put together with 23 First Nations to buy an 11.65% stake in the Enbridge pipeline system. And that's going to generate long-term, sustainable dividends for the bands that have signed on to that. So that's the model that we think we can apply to more projects like this. I've shared that with my fellow premiers, and I've also had an opportunity to meet with Chrystia Freeland and suggested that this could be an important model for them to follow as they're developing their approach to supporting First Nations acquisition of projects, including the Trans Mountain Pipeline. In Alberta, we have been and will continue to be leaders in emission reduction, guided by our emissions reduction and energy development plan. You may have seen that before Sonia Savage retired. That was her last major piece of policy work to produce a document that charts our pathway to achieving net zero, achieving carbon emissions neutrality by 2050. It is a plan to ensure Alberta remains a world leader in responsible, ethical energy production and a provider of reliable, affordable, sustainable energy while reducing emissions and creating jobs. As I mentioned, this plan is centered on the goal of reaching carbon neutrality by 2050. It is a goal we share with a lot of jurisdictions, including the European Union and Australia, South Africa, and other Canadian provinces. 2050 is widely regarded as being a realistic target, and Alberta aims to achieve it through a mix of industry incentives, technological innovation support, and smart policies. We know that Alberta entrepreneurs, Alberta oil and gas leadership, and just simply our get-it-done culture will be fundamental to achieving this. Having already cut emissions in methane from oil and gas by 44% relative to 2014 levels, we intend to keep on going, and that's not all. We are developing a framework to protect ecosystems even as our energy exports climb. Our new Environment Minister, Rebecca Schultz, as part of her mandate, will be completing the work that was commenced with the Land Stewardship Act and land use planning. And part of the importance of completing that work is to not only identify habitats for protection, but also to identify the go zones where we're going to have development of oil and gas and forestry, grazing, critical minerals development. This information needs to be had so that we know where the economic corridors need to be so that we can get more of our products to market. So that work is going to be accelerated. We're also advancing clean technology, especially carbon capture, utilization, and storage. We've invested billions into CCUS projects, from Shell's Quest project to the Alberta Carbon Trunk Line, and we've proven that this isn't just an abstract idea. Alberta is the only jurisdiction in Canada putting carbon away in sizable quantities now. We have engaged with industry partners to understand and to develop policy options that will support carbon capture investment across the province, and this will ensure that all industrial emitters are able to have some certainty. And we believe we can and should support oil and gas producers in Alberta as well as BC by reducing emissions to have the lowest emission gas coming to market. We recently, I actually had a chance to talk to a couple of folks last night who said, when are you going to come through with that carbon capture, the sequestration and pore space for small producers? Well, guess what? We already have. We have Vitor on hand, who is Brian's chief of staff, to say that we recently announced a small sequestration pore space application process, and we're working closely with industry to ensure that this supports the cleanest natural gas in the world. We got that feedback from you, and we've acted on it, so I'll be quite interested to see how many of you are able to take us up on that. The technology as well is going to be critical to our success. Our government understands the importance of innovation, of research, and of Alberta's entrepreneurial spirit, and we will be right there to provide the right environment to allow these ideas to become a reality. We understand the need to allow technological development and advancements in carbon capture, utilization, and storage to be delivered at scale for true broad-based expansion. And these technologies will allow us to lead the world in the critical mission of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and even removing them from the atmosphere once they are there. I think you had Kevin Krausser from Avatar Innovation speaking to you last year, and that kind of direct air capture, I think, is really going to get us to that last mile when it comes to becoming carbon neutral. The technologies that will provide fundamental change in the future are technologies that will provide the world with miracles of cheap and abundant energy, all while reducing carbon emissions. And those technologies will come from the minds of innovators right here in Alberta. And they will spring from here because of our geology, because of our energy industry know-how, and because of our commitment to carrying out energy exploration and development better than anyone else. This is the story of Alberta's past and present and future. Alberta is in a race to develop these game-changing technologies. We're competing with Texas and Colorado and Norway. And we will win that race so long as we are not hobbled by the ongoing poor policy decisions coming from our federal government. We don't need a just transition in Alberta because we don't intend to transition away from oil and natural gas. As many of you in the industry have pointed out, the transition we're talking about is a transition away from emissions. It's not a transition away from production. We believe industry has started down a path of reducing their emissions while exporting more oil and delivering more LNG. I often try to tell my counterparts in Ottawa that out of a barrel of oil, I believe you've now been able to produce something like 6,000 different materials, ranging from lubricants and petrochemicals all the way onward to asphalt and other building materials. And that, to me, is going to be the future. That is why I have so much confidence that as we reduce emissions, we are going to be able to increase our ability to have an imprint in the world. You may have seen recently that S&P Global released emissions results for the oil sands sector that showed that oil production grew by 50,000 barrels daily while emissions went down. And this was before carbon capture utilization and storage. This is before any of the small modular nuclear reactor options. We are doing this now, and we are just getting started. Alberta will lead the energy transformation that will change the world while protecting our atmosphere and the climate. We are putting the pieces in place to make a huge difference on energy scarcity and on climate change. And we would love to do it with Ottawa's help, but we intend to do it either way, with or without them. We are offering an alternative to Ottawa's overpriced and overhyped fantasy for a fully net zero electricity grid by 2035. As I've said, we can get there by 2050. Many of the industry players in the electricity generation market have targets that I think Capital Power has said they have a target of 2045. So that's why I believe that 2050 is achievable. 2035 is not. They want to impose hundreds of billions of dollars in extra costs on the country. Costs that will affect the returns on conventional oil and gas wells, costs that will stunt capital investment in oil and gas, and costs that will punish consumers and business owners. We have to ensure that we can be competitive and have a safe, reliable, and affordable power grid in Alberta. Alberta is blessed with natural gas reserves, which represent the bulk of our dispatchable base load of power that has enabled us to come off coal-produced electricity 6 years earlier than required. We do not have hydroelectric power, yet Ottawa will not accept natural gas as the predominant feedstock for electricity. So think about that. We are being asked to eliminate carbon from our grid at huge expense and in an unachievable time frame. So in Alberta, normal capital turnover in the electricity sector between now and 2050 would be about $92 billion. Let's remember, we have brand new gas plants on the basis of having phased out coal early. Those gas plants have a typical 40-year time horizon. And so if you abridge that and try to cut that off early, you've got stranded capital once again. Is it any wonder that we aren't seeing very many new projects being proposed for baseload power for natural gas? That's part of the reason why we have to have a 2050 time frame. Federal plans to speed things up would impose $52 billion in additional costs within a much shorter time frame. So that $92 billion plus the $52 billion, all by 2035. And these figures don't account for upgrading facilities and home heating, along with building out the grid to make it fully electric. Well, that's one of the other plans that they have. They want to have all of the industrial base on the power grid, plus all home heating on the power grid, plus all transportation on the power grid, all of this by 2035, all of this being net zero. Do you see why this is impossible? Ottawa's plans will drive away future investment in many sectors of our economy, and Alberta will be at risk for blackouts and brownouts, and that is not an idle concern of mine. Between 2016 and 2017, we had 7 level 3 critical alerts. That's when we have to have some customers not receiving power in order to maintain the stability of the grid. Last fall, we had 7 in the fall period alone. And on those days, 2 of them, when we had -30 weather, wind and solar were producing less than 100 megawatts of power for our power grid. Thank heavens we had natural gas to enable us to stay warm because we could turn our furnaces on and so that we could keep our lights on. But that is the challenge that we face, is we need to have more baseload power, because when we're at -30 and sometimes when we're at +30, we do not have necessarily wind resources that are available to us. In the winter, we don't even have solar resources available to us. Fortunately, there is another way, a better way, one that protects both the environment and the economy, and I'm asking you to add your voices to ours to ensure the correct approach carries the day. Albertans are practical, hardworking, entrepreneurial people. We need to support these attributes and build on them, and we truly hope that Ottawa will realize the need to embrace the engine of Canada's economy and not hamper our future prosperity with punitive policies. We look forward to having a fact-based discussion with Ottawa, one that results in a win-win outcome that is fair and supports the longevity of the oil and natural gas industry, the future of the hydrogen industry, and the emerging minerals industry. I should tell you that we do have a table that we've put together. I think we've just finally come up with the terms of reference. It'll be about 8 or 12 months as we try to seek this alignment. So our first option, of course, is to try to find some common ground. But I think I've made it pretty clear why it is we have continued to press for 2050 as our target. Energy security globally has demonstrated the need to have options. We need all forms of energy today and tomorrow for sustainable and reliable consumer and business use and in support of global markets truly in need. Alberta is playing this role now. We will play this role in the future. We all have important roles to play in leading Alberta's energy future, and I look forward to protecting and supporting and encouraging the growth and expansion of our global energy position for years to come. You are fighting for your industry, and I'm going to be there fighting right alongside of you. Look forward to our conversation later.